In the high peaks of the Blue Mountains, there lived a young stonemason named Kaelen. Kaelen was a man of fire and speed. He wanted his walls built in a day and his life finished in a week. He believed that the world was a machine that needed to be pushed, and if something didn't go his way, he saw it as a failure of the universe. One day, while working on a great bridge for the king, a sudden freak landslide swept away months of his hard work. His tools were buried, his stones were crushed, and his dream was in ruins. Kaelen stood in the mud and cursed the sky, screaming that the world was unfair and that his timing had been robbed. As he sat in the wreckage, an old woman named Alara, known as the Watcher of the Tides, approached him. She didn't offer him pity. She offered him a small, plain wooden box. "Inside this box is the secret to the landslide," she said. Kaelen snatched the box and tried to pry it open, but it wouldn't budge. He used his hammer, he used his chisel, he even tried to burn it, but the wood remained unmarked. "It will open," Alara whispered, "but only when the reason for its existence is ready." Everything happens for a reason, Kaelen. But reasons do not follow the speed of a man. They follow the rhythm of the soul. For 3 years, Kaelen's life seemed to fall apart. Because the bridge wasn't built, he lost his job. Because he lost his job, he had to travel to the distant coast of Sighs to find work. Along the way, he was delayed by broken wagons, caught in endless storms, and forced to wait in tiny villages for weeks. To Kaelen, these were all mistakes of fate. A grew bitter, holding the locked box in his hand, cursing every delay as a wasted moment. He didn't realize that while he was delayed in one village, he met a woman who taught him how to carve marble. He didn't realize that because his wagon broke, he avoided a massive flood that destroyed the road ahead. He was too busy looking at the clock to see the map. Finally, Kaelen reached the great city of Oakhaven. He found that the king was looking for a master mason to build a temple of marble, a various skill he had learned during his wasted delay. He was hired instantly. One morning, while standing on the scaffolding of the new temple, Kaelen looked out over the valley. He saw the old bridge he had tried to build years ago. From this height, he realized that if he had finished that bridge, it would have been built on a hidden fault line he hadn't seen at the time. The landslide hadn't been a tragedy. It had been a rescue. It had stopped him from building a disaster and forced him on a path to learn the skills he needed for his true masterpiece. In that moment of realization, the wooden box in his pocket clicked. It fell open on its own. Inside, there was no gold or magic. There was only a single dried seed in a small piece of parchment that read, "A seed does not scream at the earth because it is dark. It waits because it is growing." Kaelen really said that patience is not the ability to wait, but the ability to keep a good attitude while waiting. He understood that every no from the universe was a not yet, and every wrong turn was a redirection toward a destination he wasn't yet ready to handle. Everything happens for a reason, but that reason is often a seed buried in the dark. If the landslide hadn't happened, he would have stayed a builder of bridges that fall. Because of the landslide, he became a builder of temples that endure. The delays weren't interruptions. They were the training. The silence wasn't emptiness. It was preparation. Kaelen looked at the temple he was building and realized that the greatest structure he had ever carved was his own soul. He stopped fighting the tide and started flowing with it, knowing that the universe never makes mistakes, only masterpieces in progress. Kaelen knew that his journey as a stonemason was only the skin of his existence, and as he sat beneath the great tree, he felt a new calling pulling him toward the northern wastes, where the mountains were made of jagged black glass, and the winds whispered in a language of forgotten sorrows. He left his golden city and his students behind, taking only his wooden box and his spade of sincerity, because he understood that a soul that stops traveling is a soul that starts to stone along the way. He met a young girl named Sora, who was trying to build a shelter out of broken shards of glass. But every time she placed a piece, the wind would shatter her work and leave her hands bleeding. Sora was a mirror of Kaelen's younger self, full of rage and the desire to conquer the environment, but Kaelen sat with her and did not offer a hand to build. Instead, he offered a hand to hold, teaching her that the glass was not breaking because she was weak, but because the glass was not yet ready to be held together, he showed her that the wind was not an enemy trying to destroy her shelter, but a master sculptor trying to smooth the edges of the shards until they could fit perfectly without force. He told her that the bleeding of her hands was the price of her pride, and that once she stopped fighting the mountain would begin to protect her. They spent 3 winters in a cave of ice, where time felt like it had frozen solid, and Sora cried that they were wasting. There lives in the cold, but Kaelen smiled and whispered that the winter is not the death of the year. It is the eternal dream of the spring, and that everything happens for a reason, including the freezing of the blood and the slowing of the breath. He taught her to listen to the silence of the ice and to see the beauty in the stillness, until she realized that the reason for their cold isolation was to teach her how to find the fire inside her own heart, instead of looking for it in the world. Outside, when the thaw finally came, Sora did not build a shelter of glass, but she built a sanctuary of song using the wind that had once broken her work to play through the hollows of the mountain, making the entire range a flute for the divine. She realized that if Kaelen had helped her build the glass walls, she would have stayed a prisoner of a fragile house. But because he let her fail, she became the architect of the air itself. Kaelen saw that his own purpose was shifting from a builder of cities to a builder of builders, and he understood that the final reason for every human struggle is to strip away what we think we are until only the truth remains. He looked at his wooden box one last time and saw that it was no longer wood, but had become a living part of his own hand, showing that there is no separation between the man and his destiny. And as he walked into the final mist of the northern peaks, he knew that the landslide, the drought, the glass, and the ice were all the same hand of love, guiding him to the realization that you are never being punished. You are always being prepared, and the reason for everything is to lead you back to the realization that you were never alone in the storm. Gemini, said Kaelen, felt the mountain begin to breathe beneath his feet, and he understood that the northern wastes were not a graveyard of glass, but a nursery for the resilient. As he and Sora stood at the edge of the world, he saw that the final gate was not made of stone or gold, but of a single mirror that reflected the entire universe. Sora asked him if the reason for their suffering was finally over, and Kaelen replied that the reason is never over, because the reason is the life itself. He showed her that the glass had shattered, so she could see the light from 1,000 different angles, and that the ice had frozen so she could appreciate the warmth of a single heartbeat. He told her that the architect of dreams does not build a house for us to hide in, but a path for us to walk upon, and that every obstacle was a milestone disguised as a millstone. Kaelen took the wooden box that was now a part of his skin, and he pressed it against the mirror of the world. And suddenly, the box dissolved into 1,000,000 golden butterflies that flew into the hearts of every struggling soul in the kingdoms. Below, he realized that his long journey from the bridge to the temple and from the drought to the ice was all to prepare him for this moment of total surrender, where he was no longer a man with a story, but the story itself. Sora watched as Kaelen's body became a pillar of soft starlight and sheer, the final whisper of the Watcher of the Tides echoing through the peaks, that everything happens for a reason, including the leaving of the old. And the beginning of the new. Kaelen's legacy was not left in marble or cities, but in the courage of the girl, who now stood alone in the wind, knowing that she was not a victim of the storm, but the song of the mountain. Sora picked up a single shard of glass, and instead of seeing a weapon, she saw a diamond of the dawn, and she realized that her hands were no longer bleeding because they had been hardened by the truth and softened by the grace. She began to walk back down the mountain, carrying the light of Kaelen in her eyes, and every person she met who was crying over a broken dream or a failed plan, she simply looked at them and whispered that the landslide is a rescue and the drought is a bridge, and the winter is a dream, because the universe is not working against you, it is working for you even when it is breaking you apart, and the reason you are here is to find the fire that cannot be put out by any wind or any rain. Sora descended from the peaks, not as a girl who had survived the winter, but as a woman who had become the spring, and as she walked through the villages, she found a man named Theron, who was sitting by a broken stone wall, weeping because his harvest had been eaten by locusts, and his children were hungry. Theron looked at Sora and cursed the gods for their cruelty, asking why a good man must suffer while the wicked prosper in their palaces of gold. Sora sat in the dirt beside him and picked up a dead locust, showing him that even in the insect's wings there was a pattern of the stars, and she whispered that the locust was not an enemy of his hunger, but a messenger of his transformation. She told him the story of Kaelen and the landslide and the drought, and how the mountain had taught her that the universe does not give us what we want, it gives us what we need to grow into who we are meant to be. Theron did not understand at first, but as he listened to the rhythm of Sora's voice, he felt a strange peace settle over his heart, and he realized that the loss of his grain had forced him to look at his family for the first time in years, seeing the love in their eyes that he had been too busy to notice while counting his sacks of wheat. He saw that the hunger was a hollow space being carved out in his soul, so that a greater compassion could fill it later that year, and Sora watched as Theron did not replant the same grain, but instead dug a well that served the entire valley, becoming the protector of the water for thousands of people, proving that the locusts had not come to destroy his life, but to redirect his purpose. Sora realized then that the reason for everything is like a vast invisible tapestry, where every thread of pain is balanced by a thread of power, and that the weaver does not make mistakes, only designs that are too large for a human eye to see in a single lifetime. She traveled to the edges of the great sea, where the waves crashed against the cliffs with a violence that seemed to scream of chaos, but she stood on the salt-stained rocks, sang to the tide, knowing that the crashing was the heartbeat of the world. Trying to break open the shells of our ego, Sora reached into the water and pulled out a jagged piece of driftwood that had been tossed and broken by 1,000 storms, but it was smooth as silk to the touch, and she realized that the storm had not been trying to break the wood, it had been trying to polish it until it was fit for the hand of a king. She understood that we are all like that driftwood being tossed by the landslide, the drought, the glass, and the storm, until our rough edges are gone and we can finally be used for a purpose greater than our own survival. Everything happens for a reason, including the breaking and the making and the waiting and the taking, because the end of your plan is the beginning of the architect's masterpiece. And as Sora looked out over the infinite horizon, she saw the spirit of Kaelen in every rising wave, in every shifting cloud, reminding her that you are never being lost. You are always being found by the truth of who you are. Sora turned from the sea and began to walk toward the final horizon, where the sun didn't just set, but seemed to melt into the very earth herself, and she reached the Valley of the Forgotten Echoes, a place where those who had lost their way came to sit in the silence of their own shattered expectations. She found an assembly of souls who had once been kings and merchants and dreamers, all of them staring at their empty hands and mourning the lives they thought they were supposed to lead. Sora did not bring them food or gold, but she brought them the salt of the sea and the light of the mountain, and she told them that the empty hand is the only hand that can be filled with something new. She spoke of the driftwood and how the ocean did not hate the wood, but loved it enough to strip away its bark until its true grain was revealed. She sat with a woman named Lydia, who had lost her voice to a fever, and showed her that the silence was not a prison but a sanctuary where she could finally hear the whispers of her own soul that the noise of her past had drowned out. Sora taught them that the reason for their wandering was to prove that you can never truly be lost when the universe is your home, and that every closed door was a wall being turned into a window for a view they weren't yet ready to see. As she spoke, the valley began to glow with a soft amber light, as if the very ground was remembering its purpose, and the people began to stand, not because their problems had vanished, but because their perspective had shifted. They realized that the landslide was a rescue from a life of mediocrity, and that the drought was a preparation for a depth they never knew they possessed. Sora saw that her journey was nearing its absolute peak as she felt the presence of Kaelen, not as a memory, but as a living pulse in the air around her. And she understood that the weaver's tapestry was now complete in her heart, showing that every shadow was necessary to make the light visible. She stood at the center of the valley and raised the piece of driftwood toward the sky, and it began to dissolve into golden rain that fell upon the thirsty souls below, washing away the dust of their regret and replacing it with the water of a new beginning. She realized that the ultimate reason for every struggle and every heartbreak was to bring us to the realization that we are the architects of our own peace, and the observers of a divine play where no part is too small and no tragedy is final. Sora took her final step into the light, knowing that the story would continue in every heart that chose to trust the timing of the world, and she whispered to the wind that you are never being broken, you are only being open to receive the infinite, because the universe does not make mistakes, it only makes masterpieces out of those who have the patience to stay through the storm. Gemini said. Sora walked into the shimmering light of the valley, where the air felt like velvet and the ground was no longer made of dust, but of the very memories of those who had finally found their peace. She reached a massive gate that had no lock and no bars, but was made of a single standing pool of water that acted as a portal to the source of all things. As she stood before it, the watcher of the tides, Alara appeared for the last time, looking not like an old woman, but like a reflection of Sora's own future self. Alara told her that the final reason for every landslide, every drought, and every broken heart was to prepare the soul for this single moment of crossing, where the traveler is no longer a seeker of the truth, but the truth itself. Sora looked back at the world she had traversed, seeing the mountain of glass, the sea of driftwood, and the fields of locusts, and she realized that they were not obstacles on a path, but the jewels of a crown she had been forging with. Every step of her patience, she understood that a life without struggle is a life without depth, and that the architect of dreams uses the darkness of the night to make the morning feel like a victory. She took her piece of smooth driftwood, placed it into the pool of water, and watched as it transformed into a golden bridge that spanned the gap between the earthly and the eternal. Sora realized that the reason she had suffered was so she could build this bridge for others, showing them that the end of their strength was the beginning of their power, and that the end of their logic was the beginning of their magic. She stepped onto the bridge and felt the spirit of Kaelen merging with her own, seeing that the stonemason and the weaver were always two sides of the same divine coin, one to build the structure and one to breathe the life into it. Sora's final words to the world below were a whisper that echoed through every storm and every silence, telling Uwis that you are not a victim of the tapestry but the weaver of the threads, and that every knot of pain is a secret strength waiting to be pulled tight. She disappeared into the source where the sun never sets, and the reason is always understood, leaving behind a world that was no longer afraid of the dark, because it knew that the light was always coming for those who had the courage to wait. Everything happens for a reason, and the reason is to bring you home to the realization that you were never broken. You were only being sculpted into the masterpiece that you are today. Sora stepped through the final gate of water and felt the weight of her physical form dissolve into the very essence of the light. She was no longer a traveler, but the destination itself, and she saw that the entire universe was a single breathing lung of creation, where every inhale was a birth and every exhale was a passing. And she realized that the reason for the landslide and the locusts and the cold was to teach the heart how to expand without breaking. She looked down one last time at the world of men and saw millions of tiny glowing sparks, each one a person struggling with their own mountain of glass or their own sea of driftwood. And she reached out with a hand made of starlight and touched the wind, sending a final vibration through the atmosphere that told every aching soul that the delay is not a denial, and the silence is not an absence. She saw that the architect of dreams was not a distant judge, but a silent partner in every tear and every triumph, weaving a pattern so beautiful that if a human eye saw it for even a second, they would never fear the dark again. Sora became the spirit of the morning and the peace of the evening, her essence flowing into the stories of those who would come after her, like Kaelen and Theron and the woman who had lost her voice. She showed us that the ultimate reason for everything is to prove that love is the only gravity that holds the world together, and that your life is not a series of random accidents, but a carefully choreographed dance toward your own awakening. And as Sora merged with the infinite source, she left behind a quiet truth for those still walking the path, that the mountain does not move for you, it moves because of you, and the reason you are here is to discover that you are the light you have been searching for all along. Everything happens for a reason, and that reason is to bring you home to yourself. Sora was no longer a person, but a presence, a quiet hum that vibrated through the leaves of the trees and the crests of the waves. And she saw a man named Liam sitting in a high office in a city of glass and steel, his heart heavy with the weight of 1,000 expectations, and a soul that had forgotten how to breathe. Liam had achieved everything the world told him to want, yet he felt as hollow as a drum, staring at his reflection in the window and wondering why the golden life he had built felt like a leaden cage. Sora reached through the veil of the material world and whispered to him through the sudden flickering of a candle and the unexpected song of a bird outside his window, telling him that the reason for his emptiness was to make room for a fullness he could not yet imagine. She showed him that his burnout was not a breakdown, but a breakthrough, a fire sent by the architect of dreams to burn away the hay and the stubble of his ego, so that the gold of his true essence could finally shine through. Liam began to realize that his high-pressure life was a landslide of his own making, a bridge built on a fault line of someone else's desires, and he felt the courage of Kaelen and the patience of Sora flowing into his veins. He walked out of the glass tower and into the rain, feeling the water wash away the mask he had worn for 20 years. and he understood that everything happens for a reason, including the exhaustion that had brought him to his knees for the first time in his life. Liam stopped asking why the world was hurting him, and started asking what the world was trying to teach him. And he found that the no of his career was the yes of his destiny. As he began to build a sanctuary for those who had lost their way in the noise of the modern world, Sora watched as Liam's hands, once busy with numbers and contracts, became busy with soil and soul, proving that the Weaver's tapestry is never finished and that every ending is a disguised beginning. She saw that the reason for the modern chaos and the ancient storms was the same: to lead every human heart back to the realization that they are the masterpiece they have been trying to build, and that the universe is not a judge to be feared, but a partner to be embraced. Sora merged fully with the light of the eternal morning, her voice becoming the silence between the stars that tells us that the landslide is a rescue and the drought is a bridge and the winter is a dream. Because you are never being punished, you are only being prepared for a glory that is coming for those who have the patience to stay through the storm. Everything happens for a reason, and the reason is to bring you home to the truth that you are the light you have been searching for all along. Liam stood in the rain of the city, but he was no longer cold because he carried the warmth of Sora and the strength of Kaelen in the marrow of his bones. He looked at the skyscrapers and the digital screens, and he saw them for what they really were: temporary structures. In a permanent universe, he realized that the reason for every storm he had ever faced was to test the anchor of his soul, to see if it was hooked into the shifting sands of human praise or the solid rock of divine purpose. He understood that the architect of dreams doesn't build your life to be a comfortable house. He builds it to be a lighthouse, and a lighthouse must be built on the edge of the jagged rocks, and it must endure the highest waves to fulfill its only reason for being, which is to guide others who are still lost in the dark. Sora's spirit moved through him one last time, like a final exhale of the world, telling him that the greatest motivational lesson is not that you can do anything, but that everything can be used to make you into something beautiful. The landslide is not your enemy, it is your gravity teaching you to stand firm. The drought is not your famine, it is your thirst teaching you to find the deeper well. The ice is not your prison, it is your silence teaching you to find your own fire. And the locusts are not your thieves, they are your winds of change blowing you toward a harvest you didn't even know you had planted. You must stop asking why this is happening to you and start asking what this is creating in you, because the universe is not a judge looking to punish your mistakes. It is a gardener looking to grow your greatness. If you have the patience to stay through the winter, then you have earned the right to see the spring. So when the world breaks your heart, or the bank, or your plan, do not look at the broken pieces, look at the light that can now shine through the cracks. Everything happens for a reason, and the reason is always to bring you home to the realization that you were never a victim of a story. You are the author of a masterpiece, and the pen is in your hand exactly now, in this breath, in this moment. And in this truth, the Weaver has finished the tapestry, the Stonemason has laid the final block, and the Sentinel has opened the gate. Now it is your turn to walk through and believe that you are exactly where you need to be, to become who you are meant to be. Your time is coming. Keep believing. Keep fighting. Don't just watch. Go out and prove them wrong. Thank you for being part of the journey. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.